Okay, all right. So I believe we should start the presentation. So good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Roman Zvi, and I'm the product marketing manager managing Microsoft Azure here at Sherweb. So with us today, we have a very solid list of panelists. First of all, we have with us Michael Slater, head of sales channel marketplace for Sherweb. Second, we have Rocco Musumeche, founder and CEO of ExitMaximizer. And finally, we have Srinivasan, hosting channel manager and data center optimization lead at Microsoft. So without further ado, I will let Michael begin the presentation.
Hi, folks. Hope everybody is doing well and enjoying this nice, bright, sunny Monday morning, wherever you might be. So I want to start off the webinar by just giving a little bit of content and kind of discussing a little bit about what Sherweb is and what we do to help our partners. So we're more than aware infrastructure is a hot topic right now. There's a lot of shifting in the community from channel, a lot of new clients, a lot of new pressure, a lot of new things that MSPs are facing. They're like concerned about infrastructure. They're concerned with cloud support, billing, cybersecurity being a major thing, all sorts of different complications that really made their worlds a lot bigger in the last little bit. So whether you're at the stage where you're kind of grooming your business to grow it, or you're kind of grooming it to exit it, you're running into a multitude of problems, and we completely understand that. These pressures are kind of mounting and kind of getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, how do you resolve that? How do you get ready to scale, no matter where you are in your journey as a business owner? So the answer to that is always going to be Sherweb. We bring a lot to the table, make sure that partners can scale without sacrificing customer experience or service delivery. I think Rocco even had a point. The thing I saw him do a while ago, where he said the two most valuable things are your recurring revenue and how happy your customers are. If I'm right, Rocco, I think you said that at one point somewhere when I saw you on stage. I do agree with that. I think it's very correct. And I think that customer experience is key, and failing to deliver that is always going to be a challenge. So it's important to pick a cloud vendor that's able to help you do that, whether it's some help desk, Microsoft expertise, having integrations to every major PSA tool in the market, pre-sale services, MDR services, knock and migration services, right? You take your products from the cloud, you do that first migration to Azure, or you do your 500th migration to Azure. No matter where you are, that's something that's sure that's going to help you into the next level. Everything from marketplace, partner services, as well as solutions. I'm sure it's here to back you up and be your business partner when it comes to cloud and cloud expertise. So next up, we have Rocco, who's going to talk a little bit about himself and his history and how he can help you guys kind of get ready for that next stage in your business, no matter what it is. Thank you, Rocco.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to Microsoft and Sherweb for inviting me to participate on the webinar. And toward the end of the webinar, I'll give you some additional insight as to how you might be able to look at some of the material that I'm going to present today, or to book a call with me. So good morning, everybody. It's Rocco Musumeche with ExitMaximizer. And prior to forming ExitMaximizer, I worked for a large MSP. And during the time frame that I was there, we sold a company 4 times. The first 3 were more of a financial transaction at 7 to 9 times EBITDA, and the final transaction was at 20 times EBITDA to a strategic buyer. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the difference between the different transactions that we did and how we went from a financial to a strategic buyer. But first of all, just to give you some idea of the different responsibilities that I had whenever I was working for the large MSP. I was one of about 9 direct reports to the CEO, and we had 3 different people that were looking from a sell and service delivery standpoint that was on that executive team. So at different points in my career, I had different responsibilities. And the first one was very early on when the CEO transferred me out to California and asked me to come put a couple of companies that we had purchased, put them together and kind of make sure that they were going to be successful. And then once that was done, he asked me to run the 13 Western United States. And at this point, he basically said, just put the West Coast on the face of the map for us. It was the worst performing region since the inception of our company. And we were able to get it from going from the worst performing to the best performing over the 5 years that I was working with them. And we looked at the performance by revenue growth, EBITDA growth, as well as customer satisfaction growth. And so you might say, well, how did you go about doing this? And the first thing that I came to the conclusion of is that I had to trust the people, the associates that were actually closest to the customer. So this was unheard of before I got out to the West Coast, is that the organization, you had to go back up to the top to get a decision made at the region. And so what I immediately did is put more of the focus at the sales and the service delivery organization. So they were the ones that were running the customer. They knew what the customer needs were. They knew how to balance the resources that we had in play. And so I asked them to make decisions for our company on behalf of the customer, but I also asked them to run a P&L. So it wasn't just a free for all and they could do whatever they want, but they did have some metrics that they needed to abide by. So that was one of the biggest things that I did whenever we empowered our sales and our service delivery to actually run the customer and do the things that were best for the customer. The other thing that we did is we reduced our churn. So, we had a lot of customers that were just kind of giving other pieces of the business to other providers. And so we stopped the hemorrhage and the bleeding on that. We did some project work, but we focused on our annuity and making sure that we continue to grow our annuity as opposed to giving it up. And just like Michael said, that revenue growth, those adjacent services came from a happy customer that wanted to do more with us. And then the other thing that we did is we started looking, if we had like 4 or 5 customers out west that were doing the same type services, then we looked to centralize those resources so that we could provide a better outcome to that customer at a reduced price. So we actually increased a little bit of churn on our own just by giving up a little bit revenue, but we also grew our margin and we had a more satisfied customer. So the second thing that I ended up doing, and I think we can probably all relate to this, is that we all want to say that we want to go after new customers, and we called it new logos in our organization. But we all know that whenever that big customer comes calling and says, I need this or I need that, can you help me with this? We would drop what we were doing in the pursuit of that new logo and we would go take care of that installed customer. And by the way, that's the right thing to do. But what we found out after the first acquisition, going into the second acquisition, is that our growth was slowing. And the last 2 quarters, our install base revenue had gone from a 4% growth that quarter to a 2% growth. And we said, we don't like the trajectory that this is on. So we created this net new logo organization, and the CEO asked me to go out and run it. Basically build it, run it, produce some results. And I'm sure that you guys have been, as CEOs, the ones that would actually give those directives as to what that objective was going to be. And then some of you are like me and you were on the receiving end of that, to where he automatically told you, this is the objective in the next, and what my objective was in the next 5 years. He wanted me to be on $100 million a year run rate of annualized business, net new logo into our company. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, this is way bigger than maybe what we were doing or the position that I'm in right now. But I want to encourage you, just kind of think about some of the things that I go through in the next slide and think how you can apply that to your business, even if you start small. Because in the organization that I was building, we started small. Maybe we had 5 or 6 people to start off with. And in the first year, we did 17 million in first year value of revenue. But then over the next 3 years, we exceeded the $100 million that he'd given me an objective to do $150 million. And then, we exceeded the 100 million, which was the objective that he gave me for year 5 versus year 3. And then in years 4 and 5, we're in excess of 150 million of net new logos that we brought into the organization. And these range, I would also encourage you is that we did not know how to pursue new logos. We didn't know how to price them. We didn't know how to solution them. We didn't know what our internal costs were. So we had to build all these models and we had to build a solution plan. And in fact, we used to say that, if we chase anything that we would come in contact with, whether it was qualified or not, and we ended up with like a 7% close rate in the first year. But we said that that's not good. We need to grow that more toward the 30 to 35% close rate in net new logos. Now for the install base, where we're the incumbent, close rates of 75 to 85 and even upward, would be pretty normal. But in a net new logo, the CEO basically said, don't ever get above a 35% win rate, because his philosophy that if we did, we weren't responding to enough procurement opportunities that were coming our way. So we focused on basically the annuity business. We focused on some longer terms. We would actually give in the contract, we would suggest a 7 to 10-year contract. We would put some reductions year over year so that there would be an enticement for the organization to go with a longer term contract. And we did focus on the annuity space because we didn't want to have to recreate that revenue stream year in and year out. However, I won't disclose, I won't dispel if we had an opportunity for a project, because my philosophy were, if we're doing business with, or if we're trying to do business with someone we've never done business with before, if we could do a project, we would earn the right to get more business on the annuity side. And Michael had also alluded to that in some of the slides that he presented earlier. So, net new logos, we got to a point where, we were doing 150 million, and that also propelled us to that next exit, to where we had some nice growth from a revenue standpoint and an earnings standpoint and EBITDA. Our multiples remain the same, but we were beginning to put processes in place that we could replicate year in and year out. So this one was more of, if you will, working on the business and deciding how are we going to propel the model forward? How are we going to get a bigger valuation? And so it's thinking about what you want to be and then executing a plan to make that a reality. And then the next opportunity that I moved forward with was in running our install book of business. And our install book of business was doing good, but we still had some churn that we wanted to decrease. We had a customer satisfaction process that we had put in place, and my job was to kind of come in with a new governance model, so that we can make sure that we were going to be ahead of the curve. And I'm sure you've heard of the slang QBR, quarterly business review, but a whole new effect to what a quarterly business review was going to be about. Both from a commercial standpoint, if we have some contractual issues, from an operational standpoint, where we're looking at metrics, and I'll discuss a little bit more about stoplighting and perception toward the end of the presentation, and then also a strategic view. And that strategic view really comes into play to where, we're allowed to kind of understand from a customer standpoint what it is that they're getting ready to do and how they're moving forward in their business, which would create additional opportunities for our organization to help them get to where they wanted to be. And then for us to be able to tell them what was going on within our company, or using, that time to look at some of the new offerings that we were coming out with. So it was going to be a win-win situation whenever we talk to our customers during our quarterly business reviews. And I basically participated in a lot of those at the senior management standpoint, so that I can convey the overall strategy and direction of our company, and I could listen to what their organization was doing, and I could bring that back to our team to see if we needed to do a change in our direction, or maybe some movement in something that we learned from that customer set that we hadn't considered before. So the next slide, let me just get it over here. There we go. So then, whoops, I did one too many. So the next slide, and this is on the website, guys. I'll direct you to it in just a little bit, but this is the framework that I put together. And so out of the 30 years that I was working for this large MSP, and out of that, probably the majority of those years, I was on the executive team. So I got to see what my peers were doing. I knew what I was doing. I knew what our objectives were. I was seeing, some of the things that were going on in the market. I was understanding, the acquisitions that we were going out and layering on top of us. And so just based on all of the things that I saw going on in the organization, I put the framework together. And so the first two, the install base book of business, the revenue, and then the new logo. I've spoken a little bit about that, but I think the thing that I would want to call out on the install business side is that, we needed to kind of focus a little bit more on growing our share of wallet. And from that standpoint is what other offerings do we have available to us, adjacent offerings that we could go out and talk to our customers about so that we could get more sticky? How could we look at different ways that we could increase the revenue but decrease the cost so that we could grow our gross margins, and then in our next years with that install base customer, have the ability to give that customer some money back so that we could continue to grow our business. And the thing that I used to talk to our people about is what CIO is going to be allowed to do the same level of service for the same price the year going forward. And I mean, I think you would be in the boat with me is, you've got to see some improvement. You've got to see some benefit to something like that. You're not going to get the same amount of money to grow that or to deliver those same services. So you've got to be creative in helping the customer get more organized and get more cost efficient so that you can pass on some of those savings. They can allow you to make a little bit more money, and that earns the right to do additional either project work or annuity work as that customer has other opportunities that come forward. The other thing that I would tell you is that, sometimes you have to think differently, about what's going on in the organization. And, what I'm talking about here too is, even your offerings. And so, the stodgy things that you may have from, just a break fix model, which is kind of the things of the past, but whenever I was growing up with this large MSP, we still had those type of offerings. How do we move it to an annuity service? How can we put some of the project work in the annuity service so that we've got some ongoing revenue streams of that? And then how do we look at some of these adjacent offerings? Because if you don't, and I want to call your attention, if you're not working on the business versus in the business, you're not going to be creative in doing some of these things that are going to give you a differentiation. And so I would just call out, and I mean, we all know, the Amazons. It's the organizations that came in and, kind of they saw an opportunity, they went in, they seized the opportunity. We've seen some of the other organizations that couldn't adopt to the change, that Amazon was going through or that was presenting to the market, and they became some bygones. So you constantly need to look at the offerings that you have and just make sure that they're relevant. Another example that I would use here is, just on this recurring revenue stream in a subscription model, that we're going to be talking about a little bit more with Sri. But the bottom line to that is think about Dollar Shave Club. I know some of you might be familiar with them, but here it is. It's an archaic thing, but it's razors and razor blades. And what did Dollar Shave Club do? They saw a need. Men don't like to go to the grocery store, get their razors. They don't like, to run out of them. So what they did is they put a subscription model, and every month, razor blades and a razor, if you wanted one, would show up at your front door. And so, razors and razor blades, there's nothing sexy about that. But then when you couple it with a subscription model and look at what the Dollar Shave Club did whenever they sold it to Unilever. And if you remember correctly, that transaction was $1 billion with a B. And so as a result of that, Unilever, what they saw is, we've got this head to toe mentality. So not only can we sell them razors and razor blades, but we can actually sell them other products, adjacent services, if you will. And so Unilever has turned that business into a multi-billion-dollar business. But here again, it's something different. It's a subscription model. And I want to encourage you to consider those things in your business model as you move it forward. So one of the next items here is just on the profit growth. So if you're doing on-site services, can you move it to, remote? Can you take remote? Can you move it to the cloud? Can you leverage the existing people that might be working on site to do some additional projects to where your cost would be the same, but your revenue would go up? Can you document these processes? So these are all about the cost of goods. So what's it going to cost to deliver the service? But then when you start thinking about the back office, look at all the AI and the RPA that's out there. And I mean, you're dealing with two great partners with Microsoft and with Sherweb, and they have those type of offerings around AI and RPA so that you can, so to speak, get the back office in line so that you can continue with your profit growth. What about the diversification of the revenue? Whether or not it's a customer, that a customer whenever I was growing up through the large MSP that I had, we had a handful of customers that made up a big part of our business. And so one of the first things that we did is, we wanted that customer to make up a big part of our business, but we wanted the same revenue stream going forward, but we wanted it to be less and less of our overall book of business. So that's how we grew our install base, to get a lot of those that were smaller, get them bigger. But that's how we added on the new logos, to actually diversify, that spend, so that we didn't have, a bunch of revenue on just a few clients. I was consulting with a guy that, and if I remember correctly, it was about 150 million in revenue, and 90% of that revenue came from 6 clients. And so if he lost one of those clients, I mean, he would be in a world of hurt. He'd have to make it up. So we put some plans together to help diffuse that, and come up with better ideas, better customer bases, so that he could leverage those customer bases into the future, as opposed to being pretty heavy on just a few. The next item we have is revenue lock-in. So how do we get these longer term contracts? How do we change the model, change the paradigm, so that the customer becomes more sticky with us? And we've got some annual subscriptions, that, as opposed to just a year out, are multi-year type agreements, and mitigating that churn through that revenue lock-in. What about the business model that you have, and what's your philosophy on that? Is your philosophy on the business model, is that you just want to continue to chug along just like what you have? Or do you look at, the business model to say, how am I going to differentiate myself? And the one thing that I'm always talking about, I mean, the way that you really come up with a strategic buyer, is you got to systematize your business, so that if you walked off out of the office, and let's say you didn't come back with 6 months, would your revenue and your EBITDA still be the same? And I was talking to one guy that we tagged up with at one of the conferences, and he said that he went away for 6 months, and the revenue and the EBITDA grew while he was gone. So, whenever I dug under the covers, he was doing exactly like what we were talking about here: systematize the business. And there's certain things that you remember throughout your career. And one of the things that I remember, and by the way, my job, I was basically on an airplane 5 days a week. So the CEO, sometimes, and no pun intended here, but they come up with these great and grandiose plans. And so we've got one of those emails one time, and the CEO wanted us to fly into the headquarter location for a weekend, and we were just going to have a business meeting. And I'm sure that you can already begin to think about the thoughts that were running through my mind is, what in the world are we going to talk about the whole weekend? Why do I have to fly in on a Friday night from wherever I was throughout the US or the world, sit through a Saturday and Sunday session with my peers, and then go to the next meeting on Monday? But I have to admit, that was the best experience I had in my life. And he had brought a consulting firm in, and the exercise, was actually one question. And the question is that if a competitor came into your space with a blank piece of paper, what would they form the corporation, and what services would they deliver that would make you say, or would make you basically jump out of your boots, if you will? And so we spent the whole weekend formulating a company, that we would say, crap, I can't believe that this organization is in my space now. And then once we formed the corporation, we spent a second weekend about a month and a half later saying how we were going to compete with it. So here again, it's not something that you get excited about doing, especially when you have to give up a lot of time on the weekend. But it actually was a meeting that, I'm very fond of whenever I relate back to it and talk about it, because it did have an impact in the business, and it did make a big difference in what we were going to do as we went forward. I was also talking to a private equity guy just last week, and we were talking about security, and we were talking about the last transaction that he did. And he sold a piece of his business to another private equity firm, and he got 18 times EBITDA. And so whenever we were discussing, how was he able to come up with that type of a factor, it all boiled down to the same thing that we're talking about right now. It was systematic. And so this other firm that bought into that company, they basically said is that if we can just use their systems and process in the 3 organizations that we've purchased, we can get 1 + 1 = 3. And so that's the reason that they bought it, was because it was going to be strategic and add value based on the systemized business that they were doing. The next one that we have here, item number 7, is on acquisition. So you have to get on some sort of an acquisition spree, but is it going to be for revenue growth? Are you going to try to get a technology that you're going to bring into the organization, get a head start? Are you creating a new offering that you're looking at a build versus buy? Those type decisions. Are you going to just acquire talent that you need to move the business forward? And then the last one that I wanted to talk about here is core values and customer view. So what are your core values as an organization, and how do you view your customer? Is the customer a necessary evil? And where I was, the customer was actually the person that put the money in our pockets, so that as an individual, from a personal standpoint, that we could do the things that we wanted to do. So we had what we referred to as an inverted pyramid, where the customer was always on the top of the organization. And then down in the very apex was the CEO. And the CEO's slogan was that if you're not talking to the customer and supporting the customer, who kind of sales and service delivery were the ones that were doing that, if you're not supporting the customer, you better be supporting someone that is, and that's called job security. So our message there was always taking care of the customer, and the profits would follow. And I mean, anytime that we put an organization chart in place that did not have the customer at the top and have the organization below the customer, at the executive level, we were fined $5. We'd put it in a pot, and at the end of the year, we would donate it to a charity. But needless to say, you kind of learn those messages pretty quick. The other thing that I want to talk about is just the stoplight and the perception report. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the perception report, as we get further into the presentation. But really, that stoplight was critical to get feedback from the customers so that we could make a determination. Are we on the right track? We falling behind? We're making progress? Those type things. Very important to the EBITDA and the revenue that we were able to attain. So the next slide that I want to talk about is really a strategic versus a financial transaction. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a comparison here. So let's say that, you've got an EBITDA of $1 million. And let's say that, you've got a financial versus a strategic buyer. And in the financial, and I've just kind of arbitrarily picked some numbers. I think the strategic side of it's a little light. The financial side may be a little bit aggressive, but these are common factors that I've seen in working with other MSPs. But if you're looking at $1 million and you're looking at a multiple of 6 to 8 with a financial buyer, you're looking at $6 to $8 million as far as an outcome, for the founder. If you're looking more strategic, where I've talked to you about, the systemization, maybe you got a little bit of that, or it's a business that they're seeing you as strategic, you can get a little bit more from an EBITDA standpoint. So a multiple of 8 to 12. And as I just told you, the organization that I was talking to last week, they ended up with a multiple of 17, but a 6 to 8 or an 8 to 12. And then let's say that you really wanted to work on the business, you wanted to put some effort into making sure in the next 3 or 4 years, as you did an exit, that you received a lot more from an EBITDA standpoint, and your multiples were going to be consistent. We can look at the next slide, and let's say that you were able over the next 3 years to grow your EBITDA from $1 million to $5 million. And then if you look at this from a financial standpoint, buyer, you've got a multiple of 6 to 8, which would bring you in at 30 to 40 million, or you've got a multiple for a strategic buyer at 8 to 12. It would bring you 40 to 60 million. And where we were on this, when we did that final transaction, we were able to get 20 times EBITDA for this strategic buyer. And so in that particular case, what happened is this organization had 1,700 store locations, and they were basically putting a business model together. They'd done some research. They had $6 million SMB clients or potential clients, prospects, within a 2-mile radius of their store. And so what they wanted to do is offer a wheel of services And these services were either, financial, HR, IT, whatever they were, but I mean, offer the infrastructure back to those organizations. The one area that they didn't have was around IT. And so that's the reason that they purchased the organization that I was with, because, that would automatically give them those resources that they need in order to provide those services. And so they were willing to pay 20 times EBITDA as opposed to trying to go out and build it on their own. So one way is a strategic to their business plan. The second way that I talked about a little bit is it's going to be strategic because it's systematized. So it's looking to say it's a well-oiled machine. If I just buy this organization, I can implement their processes in my organization and I get phenomenal growth. And then I can cross-pollinate between the two customer sets so that 1 + 1 is equal to 3, not just 2. So one story that I want to tell you before we move on and to the next presenter, and this one is around the perception. So I've already talked a bit about install base, the profit growth, and the business model, but now the perception. And this isn't a very pleasant story, but I'll go ahead and tell it because it had a big impact on me as I was going through my career. But I had a customer out west in Southern California. We were doing $3 million of product and $3 million of services. We'd already been through 2 3-year terms with a customer. Lo and behold, we get an RFP from them, and it was for the same scope of work that we were doing. So we went through that pursuit process with a customer, and at the end of the day, they awarded the business to someone else. Whenever I went and talked to the lady that was responsible for our business, and I asked her, I said, why did we lose the business? And in this particular case, we had a 90% SLA attainment level that we were expected to deliver to, and this was both on the product and the services. And we were delivering at least 95 across the entire thing. And so, but we lost the business. So whenever I asked her the question, why did we lose the business? Her response was, I couldn't stand to be in the same room as your technicians. So it had nothing to do with meeting the SLAs and everything to do with perception. So as a result of that, I basically made a commitment to the organization and to myself that this would never happen again on my watch. And as a result of that, we put this perception report in place. And we would ask, not only SLAs that were black and white, and then we'd have action plans around these SLAs if we were deficit in them, but on the perception, are you getting the business value? Do you like the people that you're dealing with? Do you have to ask people more than once to do something? It's the soft things that could get you in trouble and you not even know it. So as a result of that, we put this stoplight and the perception report in place, and I'm happy to report never again did I lose a client in the next 20 years just because of perception. So the final slide that I want to just leave you with is that, the resources that I talked about, ExitMaximizer.com, and you can go and download the content. A lot of the stuff that we talked about today will be on that website, and in this content you can download and look at for free. And then if you'd like to just have another conversation with me, feel free to just go to talktorocco.com and you can book a time from that site. So with that being said, thank you again for the time. You're in good hands with these two partners that are along with me with Sherweb and with Microsoft. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Sri to bring us home. Sri?
Awesome. Thank you, Rocco. Hope everyone is able to hear me loud and clear. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today and hear from us about the market trends and how Sherweb can help you in your cloud journey. So a little bit about me. Been in Microsoft for the last 10 years, working with scale partners and different partners. Been in the industry for like close to 19 years. Prior to Microsoft, I was a data warehousing architect with a global system integrator. And this fiscal year, for the last 12 months, I've been working with data center partners in order to help them move to cloud and build and optimize their operations in Azure. Okay, so I wanted to start this presentation with a little bit of a trend chart that we are seeing in the market. right? IDC has forecasted that Canadian intelligent cloud and intelligent edge market is going to be at like 4.5 trillion by end of 2025. And our infrastructure market alone is at 1.5 billion, to be forecasted to end at 1.5 billion for this fiscal year. And even more bigger good news is it is growing at 17% cumulative annual growth rate, which means that it will end at 3 billion by end of 2025. So there's a huge opportunity. The numbers are very big. And 85% of your Canadian customers are SMB customers, right? So they are all looking for help, and that presents a great opportunity for MSPs. And with what Mike mentioned, Sherweb has a great platform to help all the partners in order to help their end customers and move them in the journey to the cloud. The trend that we are seeing, which has remained consistent over the last 24 to 36 months, is that small medium business customers are moving a lot towards replacing their existing solution, which was like augmenting existing solution a couple of years before, right? So with that, it presents a huge opportunities for the MSPs, as you can see in the chart. Security is like about 39%, database infrastructure is about 51%, and storage plays a huge part as well in terms of like the priority for the SMB customers to augment to replace their existing solutions. Right. In the last few years, last couple of years, we have seen the COVID and what the remote security opportunity has to present. A year ago, businesses were responding to the needs created by the global crisis. They were thinking like how to create a secure environment by keeping our workers remote, so on and so forth. But now customers have come out of it, and they are now focusing more about recovery. They're focusing more on the value, reducing cost, adapting to business models, and eventually they start to focus on future opportunities and growth, right? Like as what Rocco mentioned, that's what makes you more interesting for a strategic buyer rather than a financial buyer, right? So moving forward, what we are hearing from the customers on what their priorities where MSPs can help or cloud-born resellers can help is how can we address the capacity constraints through remote work? How can we come out of the fragility surrounding the data center businesses? And how can we prepare ourselves for the future? Those are like top burning questions within the CEO's mindset in terms of like driving a chart or the growth roadmap for the growth, right? So this is where I feel like it's a huge opportunity for the resellers to help our end customers and help them in their journey to the cloud. So this is an important slide where I want to spend some time, right? If you are seeing a partner who has invested in Azure, they seem to be like growing at 123% rather than a data center partner who is growing at 6% from a year-on-year perspective. Right? If you think about and this has primarily been possible because Azure has been helping the customers from compute, storage, and the AI requirements the customers are going through in terms of like building the next shape of their business. And so Azure invested partners have seen tremendous growth and opportunities in terms of helping these end customers. Right? Even better statistical point is like a partner who has invested in Azure or Microsoft are seeing a profit percentage or a or a profit margin of about 43%, which is like 19 points higher than compared to 19 points higher on margin compared to partners invested on other cloud vendors. For example, GCP, it's about 32 to 33 percentage points, right? So there's a huge profit margin when you invest with Microsoft. It becomes even better when you are like a certified Microsoft. There are like certain certification paths, like a security certified partner or an AVD certified partner. The margin becomes even more pronounced when you are a specialized partner for a Microsoft cloud platform or a cloud delivery solution, right? The next point that I want to touch, which you might also heard from Satya and other senior leaders in Inspire and other Microsoft presentation, is a partner is expected to see a revenue of $10 for a license of for a dollar of license sold within the Microsoft licenses. So I would always encourage you to see like where you are. Are you seeing that amount of revenue, and how can you drive your solution strategy to come to that level and increase your profitability, right? And this has been possible primarily because partners have invested in Azure, leveraging all its services from compute, storage, AI, along with other cloud products like M365 and consolidated database of D365 and all those kind of products, which helps you to build a customer-centric solution rather than a one-on project that you'll be able to deliver to your end customer. That's where I see like a huge opportunity, great numbers for the partners to invest and build a practice around Azure. You can also see like how Microsoft has shaped its stock projections by investing more on the cloud platform, right? Azure investment has been all-time high within the Microsoft ecosystem, and this has been reflecting in the stock as well. When I joined the company in 2011, the stock prices were about $20 per share. But if you look at today, even the start of this fiscal year, it was trending around 320 odd dollars per share. Today, it's like about 270, but it's projected to be at $410 per share at the high end, right? So there's a huge growth that we are seeing within the Microsoft ecosystem, and that has been reflected in the market from the stocks and share perspective. From an Azure perspective, the commercial cloud revenue has been growing at 30% year over year, and Azure has been growing at 51% year over year. And that we are seeing consistent across many partners who have invested their time, energy, and people to grow and build their operations around Azure. In the next slide, I would also want to touch upon some of the concerns that partners might have in terms of building their operations in Azure, right? Like what we have heard as a common theme is like, hey, I have seen SPLA profitable. I just bought the hardware and other infrastructure, which we are not able to invest on Azure, right? Our customers don't care whether we are on-prem or whether we are on cloud, as long as we are providing secure services. And finally, my costs are better when we provide the services in SPLA rather than Azure. I would want to address each and every point in the subsequent slide and hope that would sow some seeds of thoughts in you to think and leverage Azure in the future. Right? Predominantly, when partner sees like, hey, my costs are better and average fixed cost is like better in SPLA rather than Azure, I'll be walking through a customer scenario that will elaborate this point. Right? We have a customer who has like hosting RDS CADs, Windows Server Data Center licenses, SQL Data Center licenses, and they are working with an cloud partner in order to move to cloud, right? In such a scenario, when we did an Octopus assessment, which would go and scan the customer infrastructure and help you understand like the inventory of the infrastructure and the cash flow, what it looks like from an on-prem perspective, what it looks like from when you move to the cloud, so on and so forth, right? And Sherweb is a partner who can nominate you for this Octopus assessment, and that's a free of cost assessment driven by Microsoft, right? So if you do that kind of an assessment for your end customer for your infrastructure, on the first look, most of the customers are negative on the profitability, as you can see in this slide, right? Most of them seem to be like negative profit compared to what you offer in SPLA. And you would initially think that SPLA is more profitable than Azure. This is a consolidated Azure profitability. As you can see, like if you take a deeper look, every customer is like negative on profitability. But things starts to change when you start to leverage other services of Azure. For example, if you leverage Azure Active Directory P2 and Microsoft 365 E3, the scenario completely changes from a profitability standpoint, right? Here is the next slide, which talks about those kind of conversion. When you see, like initially, all the customers are on red, and when you add this P2 and M365 E3, the profitability scenario changes, and most of the customers become green from a profitability standpoint. So that's how the partners are able to see that $10 revenue margin when they sell a license of Azure, when they sell a license of Microsoft, and they're able to see that kind of huge margins compared to other vendors from a profit margin standpoint, right? Hopefully, this addresses some of your concerns around profitability and SPLA margins. The second point that I wanted to touch upon is the cost model, right? Let's say you're hosting a 4 gig HP DL380 machine, which has like 40 threads and 384 GB RAM, and other specification as mentioned in your in the slide, and the 8 GB machine. Right? When you compare the Azure cost with the average fixed cost model in the data center world, right? Azure turns out to be like much cheaper when you provide the 3-year RA, and when you provide the 3-year RA cost than a pay-as-you-go on-demand kind of pricing cost. As you can see here, if the data center is being operated at 100% capacity, definitely no questions, your on-prem is like much cheaper than Azure. But no data center operates at like 100% capacity. They operate at a minimum of 70% capacity, right? And when you compare the cost at 70% capacity, both for a 4 GB machine and a 8 GB machine, Azure turns out to be like much cheaper than your on-prem cost. And this has been a proven cost model that Microsoft has studied a couple of data center partners, and eventually come out to this cost-based analysis, right? So I would urge you to consider what's the capacity utilization of your data center, and compare the cost with Azure when you select moving your customers onto the cloud. Sorry. Moving on, I would also want to shed some light on top 10 reasons why most of the customers have been choosing Azure as an infrastructure. As you can see, 95% of the Fortune 500 companies are on Azure. So this gives us a very good install base in terms of like helping those end customers in order to provide various services onto the cloud. Secondly, Azure has a massive scale from a data center perspective, and it is there at like 54 different regions that provides like high redundancy and high availability from a data center standpoint. And thirdly, it has like full range of tools and portfolio of services that needs to be offered to the end customers, and meet them where they are, rather than forcing them to choose one of the tools or one of the languages in order to build their applications and solutions to the end customers. Finally, Azure has been the most trusted and secured cloud in the market today as compared to other vendors, right? So it has got the most number of compliance certificates, most number of security certificates in order to ensure that the customer environment is safe and secured when they move on to the cloud. Right. This is an important slide that I would want to take a few minutes on. Azure meets your goal in terms of like a compute and storage workloads where you are and help you in your journey to the cloud. This has all kinds of virtual machine, be it from high compute to memory optimized to quantum computer kind of a compute virtual machine requirement. So you can choose whatever virtual machines that you need from a compute standpoint, and it can support a general purpose Windows SQL Server, Linux kind of an application to purpose build SAP kind of a environment build to be built on the cloud, right? So it has like various options of virtual machine for compute and storage in order to help you in this cloud journey. And secondly, it also has like a low cost storage used for like general backup kind of scenario to high input output, high throughput, low latency kind of most demanding workloads kind of scenarios that are required from a cloud perspective. So there's like standard HDD, and you have like standard SSD that could be used for your backup kind of scenarios for any kind of virtual machine. Then you have your premium SSD, which has like low latency and high throughput kind of features for demanding workload. And you have the ultra disk, which is like more from a low latency and high demanding workload perspective, right? So Azure has like a lot of features or services that can be like leveraged in order to meet where you are and help your cloud journey and help your end customers. Finally, I would also want to touch upon this kind of sustainability. Now that most of the companies are investigating on what sustainability means, Microsoft is like very much committed in terms of like leveraging technology to help everyone or empower everyone to build a more sustainable planet for our future, right? So, and this is not just from an operations standpoint. Microsoft is like doing the business to help. I mean, Microsoft is like uh, committed in terms of like driving this sustainable future, leveraging technologies. And I would want to leave you with a few key takeaways that Microsoft has learned from its journey of building a sustainable cloud practice, moving the data center onto Azure, which has been like reducing the carbon emission, carbon tax funded innovation to drive the right behavior, and smart buildings, reducing the energy consumption, so on and so forth. So I'll leave it to you for reading. But this is an important feature where Microsoft has built into its cloud practice, helping to reduce the carbon footprint and building a better future and a better planet, right? So I would leave you with this. And finally, like Sherweb, as Mike mentioned, Sherweb has a great platform and tools to support you wherever you are in your cloud journey in order to take advantage of both the Azure opportunities and the services that Sherweb has to offer to help you build and optimize your operations in Azure. With that, we are opening the floor for any questions, and thanks a lot for your time and attention here.
Thank you, Sri. So thank you, Sri. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Rocco, for your presentation today. Also, thank you to all our attendees today for attending today's webinar about being profitable on Azure with Microsoft and Sherweb. I'm going to leave a couple of minutes for you. If you have any questions, just to type them in the chat, and I'll share them with the rest of the team. But in the meantime, I just want to summarize that today we shared with you that Sherweb can help you kickstart any of your Azure projects. Rocco presented the ExitMaximizer Framework and how to apply it to your business. We also look at more detail how to be more profitable with Azure, explained to us by Sri. So if you require more information or if you'd like to speak to one of our Azure experts, you can reach out to Sherweb through our website or by calling our customer success team. So again, I'll leave a couple of questions before we end the webinar. I'll leave a couple of minutes before we end the webinar for some questions in the chat. And if there's none, then we'll just end it. So I'll see. I'll give it another 30 seconds. Okay, so no questions so far. Again, I want to thank you for your time today. A copy of the webinar will be shared with you shortly by email. So thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a wonderful day.